Good morning, Aubrey. How are you?
I'm great, Jessica. How are you?
I am super stoked. Guys, we just found out yesterday that all three of our podcasts got in the top 20 in China of all podcasts. It's
Of
not just
all podcasts,
yeah,
like
not just
imagine every
education.
podcast that has billions of viewership. We beat a lot
So
of them.
crazy. I'm
Amazing.
so proud of us. Guys, if you didn't know, we have two other podcasts here at All Ears English. The main show, All Ears English, of course, and then there is Business English. And right now, you are listening to IELTS. So let's get into IELTS. Aubrey, what are we teaching today?
Yeah, we're talking about linking phrases today. In a recent episode, we talked about how IELTS is not always like conversation. You often have to do things on the IELTS speaking exam that feel sort of unfamiliar because it's so different from daily conversation, right? That was
Yeah.
episode 1407, 3 ways IELTS speaking is not normal. And we thought about linking phrases and we said that is a whole separate episode. So that is what
Totally.
we're giving you today. It's a little bit of a follow-up. So be sure to hit
Yeah.
follow if you missed that episode. Scroll up, check it out. And if you missed it, you're probably missing a lot of our episodes. So be sure to hit follow.
Yes, awesome. So, guys, we are going to talk about 5 transition phrases or linking phrases today. We're going to tell you what they mean, why we don't use them in real life, and we're going to tell you where you should use them on IELTS. But sneak peek, they're all formal phrases, right? So, they're all for speaking part 3 and writing. Okay.
Yes, and these are phrases that we don't use often in conversation, which makes
Right.
them even higher scoring on IELTS because the examiner is not hearing them constantly. So they're definitely like, ooh, these are higher scoring vocabulary. They're more rare, they're less common
Exactly.
and more formal, like you said, perfect for part 3. So they're
Yeah.
boosting both your vocab scores and your fluency and coherence because they're helping you give answers that are more organized, where your thoughts are linked.
Totally. All right. So the first phrase is due to the fact that. So it just means because. And in daily conversations, right? I'm not going to say like, James, due to the fact that I'm trying to save money, we're going to cook more. I mean, like I wouldn't say that in real life, but on IELTS, of course, you have to use fancy phrases like this when we're talking about formal topics and speaking part 3. Okay. And of course,
Exactly. You can't
on
say
writing.
because over and over and over, which
Right.
when you're just having a conversation with your kid, with your friend, absolutely say because all day long, but not on IELTS speaking.
Exactly. So here's an example of how you could use it on IELTS. Let's take excuse me. Let's take the IELTS topic of art museums. Everybody loves talking about art museums, I know. So how can we use this phrase? We could say due to the fact that art is extremely beneficial for our mental and spiritual development, I feel that they should all be free.
Ooh, so impressive. And even if you're using yourself as a personal example, I could say, I feel that art museums aren't attended enough, aren't
Mm,
frequented enough would be even better, due to
nice.
the fact that when I went to museums in Paris, they were like a ghost town, completely empty.
Oh, no. Oh, can you imagine?
I know, it's
Oh,
always like just me. Like, where is everyone?
that's one of the saddest things I've ever heard.
I
Okay.
know.
All right, guys. So the next phrase is a shining example of this. Now, Aubrey, would you ever say that in real life?
Never. It'd be so
I no,
strange,
it'd
right?
be
If I want
weird.
to back up my point to be like, a shining example of this was a podcast that I heard, and I'm giving some example. It's so formal. We
Yeah.
don't use it in regular conversation.
No, no, man. It's like it's really only for writing, guys. But of course, you need to speak like you write in speaking part 3, right? So again, go back and listen to IELTS 1407. It's a couple episodes ago last week to hear more about how IELTS speaking is not like daily conversation. But again, like this is a phrase that I would never use just in daily speech, like ever. But speaking part 3, writing task 2. It's fantastic because, like Aubrey said at the beginning, it's an interesting linking phrase, right? You're
Right.
not going to hear this. The examiner's not going to hear this or see this from every student, okay? But it is appropriate for formal statements. So let's take the IELTS topic of the environment, right? If the question is like, what law should your government pass to help the environment or whatever? Aubrey, can you come up with an example sentence?
Yes, I could imagine because here in Arizona where I live, they've removed a lot of recycling. So I could
Oh,
use that, right? I would say recycling should be increased rather than decreased. As a shining example, glass, which can no longer be recycled here in Arizona, it's vital that cities, I want to say like cities, what's the word, Jessica, when you want to, when invest? Thank you. I got it myself. Cities must invest in recycling.
okay, awesome. Yeah, so a shining example, guys, we use that to introduce good examples of things, right? So I could piggybacking on what Aubrey said, we could say like Portland is a shining example of a city that takes seriously its responsibility to recycling in the environment. And then I would give, a detail about the recycling programs here, right? Okay, awesome.
I feel like my example was such a good example of why you need to practice, right? Because you need to use these linking phrases. You need to be able to come up with paraphrases. But in
It's
general
tough.
conversation, my tendency is to say like, "Oh, what's the word for Jessica? What's the word for that?" You can't
Totally.
do that on IELTS, right? So the more you're practicing your sample answers, you'll be able to paraphrase, phrase, right? Say it a different way so that you don't have to do that.
Totally. All right, awesome. So, here's an interesting phrase that also introduces an example. A case in point is. So shining example introduces a positive example, right? A case in point could introduce any example. Now, this is a slight exception for me because in daily speech, I do use this sometimes, but I shorten it, right? So it's not like grammatically correct necessarily. So in daily speech, I would shorten it and I'd be like, oh, case in point, I just ran into my friend yesterday who blah, blah, blah. So
Yes.
that's like in speech, I would say that. And you could say that in speaking part three as well. But grammatically correct for writing, we have to say a case in point is. Okay. So let's say that the topic is about celebrities' right to privacy. We could say, like, I believe some celebrities handle this very well by taking themselves out of the limelight as much as possible. They don't lay the blame at the foot of the press, they just choose to seclude themselves when they're not working. A case in point is Keanu Reeves. When he's not working, he just goes back to Canada and lives his life. He just, he eats a lot and hangs out with friends, and then he'll get in shape for his next movie.
Yes, you can see how this is a direct paraphrase for example, or
Yeah,
for instance. So, especially if you have already used that, replace it with a case in point is, and then share your example.
it's such a good phrase. It sounds so fancy, so smart. All right. Next phrase, guys. We have two more for you. In contrast. So, yeah, it sounds like kind of a simple phrase, I guess, because it is a little more common, but I still wouldn't use it in daily conversation.
No, we really don't because even if we're having an argument and we're sharing a contrasting point of view, we're still making sure our vocabulary is less formal, often to soften the point, right? We're trying to keep the peace when we're having a conversation. But
Right.
when it
That's a
comes
good
to
point.
IELTS speaking, if you're contrasting two opinions or two facts, you want to use these higher scoring, less common linking phrases to do so.
I mean, do you say nevertheless and nonetheless in daily conversation also?
No,
Yeah, not
I
really.
don't say those either, right?
Uh-uh.
We just become much more informal when we're
Yeah.
speaking. We don't wanna sound condescending. We don't want to make especially if we're having an argument for sharing contrasting information, we don't wanna be contentious. And I feel like that, making our vocabulary less formal is one of the
Yeah.
ways we do that in day-to-day conversations.
100%, 100%. So, day-to-day conversations, I would use but or however. However is common, guys, in daily conversation. So,
Yes.
it's not one of those high-scoring phrases like in contrast. All right, let's give an example. What if you're asked about celebrities' responsibility to be role models, right? What's a good example and a bad example using in contrast?
So, for example, I could talk about this sounds terrible, but I know Britney Spears is synonymous for not being as good of a role model for little girls, but you could
Yeah.
actually contrast this stereotype with your personal feelings or something else. You could say,
Hmm.
at times, Britney Spears has been accused of being a terrible role model. In contrast, if you watch her documentary, you will find that she does care about and donates to
Hmm.
charities that support young women.
Well, I learned something about Britney
There you
Spears
go.
today. That's an awesome
Bonus information.
example. You learn a lot here on IELTS Energy, you guys. Okay, the last one, guys, and this one just cracks me up because I can't imagine using this in daily conversation. Be that as it may, it sounds so condescending. Like I would
It
never
really
say
does.
this in daily conversation, guys. However, because it is so hoity-toity, this is a very posh phrase, be that as it may. It is great for IELTS. Now, what does it mean?
Yeah, so it's another way of just saying in spite of that, right?
Yeah,
So in a conversation like Jessica's saying, if you're conceding someone's point, you're making a concession, and then you say, be that as it may, it does sound very condescending. But if you're
yeah,
using it, for example, in a part three answer, let's say
right,
you're talking about crime in cities,
yeah,
and you have shared that the city where you live has high rates of crime, then you could use this linking phrase to say, be that as it may, this is not a reason to feel unsafe. Instead, we just need to
nice.
see policy change.
Nice, that was a great example. That was awesome. All right, guys. So listen to this episode a couple times. Write down these linking phrases, and we want to know how you're using them. Use one of these linking phrases in a review, guys, wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to this show. Leave a rating and review. It really helps people find us around the world. So use one of today's phrases in your review, guys. All right, awesome. Thanks for teaching with me today, Aubrey.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. Use these in your practice speaking answers. They are going to boost your scores on test day so you can get that score you need on IELTS speaking.
Yep,
Awesome. Thanks,
awesome.
Jess.
Awesome. Bye, Aubrey.
Bye.